Double Dragon Neon is awful and no one should play it, primarily because the beat-em-up genre is dead, but also, it's far too reliant on being both an homage as well as a parody of the 80s, and no one digs either of those things. 3 out of 10? More like a 0 out of 50. An F grade if I've ever seen one. Trust me, if you enjoy things that are fun, you will hate this game. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of the 2.5D polygonal side-scrolling art style in any game, but it works in Double Dragon Neon. In a lot of ways it adds to the cheesy, campy aesthetic, but it also makes the action feel a lot smoother when the camera zooms, pans, and tracks the player's action across the many different backgrounds and arenas. Despite how 80s driven this thing might be thematically, and how exhausted the belt scroller genre is, Double Dragon Neon feels inspired, masterfully crafted, and often pretty hilarious. Though I must admit most of those aspects were lost on me, as I'm a bit of an emotionless sod who can rarely pull my head out of my own pretentious ass long enough to appreciate something this honest, entertaining, and great. The Double Dragon series as a whole has been relatively dormant for decades, with the last quality contribution being on the Game Boy Advance by Million and published by Atlus in 2003. It is considered to be one of, if not the best title, right up there with Super Double Dragon for the Super Nintendo and Double Dragon 2 on the NES. I've never been any good at the handheld Game Boy Advance game, and the appeal of Super Double Dragon's slow, repetitive, bland gameplay has always been lost on me, so it has been a very long time since I've truly enjoyed a canonical series entry. Not only does Neon feel really good to play, offer up a fair challenge, and keep things interesting with a wide variety of compelling stages, it also might be the single greatest Double Dragon game on the market. That is, if you have poor tastes. Luckily, I do, and boy, do I love this game. The controls are tight and responsive, and it is a good thing they are so reliable because it doesn't take very long for the game to require some pretty precise reaction timings. This isn't your typical beat-em-up. Despite the rather limited movesets of playable protagonists and unlockable baddies, the challenge comes from a plethora of projectiles, platforms, other obstacles, and words that begin with P. The need to nearly master the roll mechanic is pretty much mandatory as well, heading into Stage 3. There are times when the action zooms in so close that it looks and performs like a fighting game, yet others where the camera pulls so far back that it shares a lot of qualities to action platforming titles. This boss, for example, gave me some serious Contra flashbacks. Double Dragon Neon might be a slice of 80s nostalgia, but it isn't exclusively a beat-em-up, or at least, it doesn't feel that way. The core game controls are prevalent and simple throughout. It's the environmental challenges that shift and change around them. It's a good thing that WayForward went this route too, because everyone knows beat-em-ups are dead, at least according to those who get paid to steer consumers towards other franchises and genres.
Make your money, honey!
Chocolate.
The buttons are responsive and enemy engagements are well choreographed, but it might take someone used to a quicker playstyle a little time to get used to the slower pace of the game. To be frank, I didn't really like the way the combat felt initially. Characters sort of lumber about a little bit more than I'm used to in these sorts of games, but it only took a couple of levels to get accustomed to the more deliberate fighting style. As I mentioned, there's quite a lot going on here, and if I'm being honest, Double Dragon has always been a bit slower than its contemporaries. At the stage 3 point, however, I was completely on board with the mechanics and subsequent playthroughs became more and more entertaining. Upon completion the first time around, I promptly restarted the game, something I almost never do. I wouldn't say the game expects a lot from the player, but it does play quite a bit differently than others in the genre, which is a good thing because it keeps things exciting and varied until the very end. The last boss is actually one of the game's biggest highlights, as well as, obviously, the most challenging part of the adventure. I did find some of the difficulty curves to be a bit unbalanced throughout the levels, with some ending far quicker and easier than others, with no discernible climaxes, but that's a pretty petty complaint overall, considering how well the entire package wraps itself up. All of the characters are stereotypes relative to their 80s conventions. The Double Dragon dudes are Mimbo Bozos, people in the streets don trashy garb, black dudes have afro picks that they also use as weapons, the merchant is a wise old Asian, and the store owner is a gruff metalhead. Overall, the game has a great sense of humor. It's pure, absurd fun. The presentation feels honest without a sense of contrived pandering. The antagonist, Skullmageddon, is the clear star with an almost inherent need to be an archetypal 80s villain, with seemingly no other means of existence in the world than to mess up the protagonist's life by kidnapping their girlfriend, singular, girlfriend, Marion, which in and of itself is a callback to the absurdity of the first game's narrative where both brothers apparently shared one woman. WayForward knew that the story wasn't important, so they played to those strengths by making the in-game encounters silly, fun, and oftentimes hilarious. Other than Sean Velasco's excellent voice work as Skullmageddon, perhaps the biggest reason to play Double Dragon Neon is to hear Jake Kaufman's amazing score, which not only includes remixes of other tracks from the series, but new songs, complete with lyrics, which may be a bit of a distracting negative to some, but I personally like it a lot. Particularly this one, Mango Tango, from City Streets Part 2, with guest singer Jessie Seeley, who also voices Linda in the game, the sexy dominatrix.
On the ceiling
In addition to the excellent soundtrack, there are also collectible special moves and attributes to pick up throughout the game in the form of mixtapes. Not only do these add buffs to the Buffoon Brothers arsenal, the tapes themselves have little snippets of original songs that ape the styles and sounds of different bands from the era, including a very Enya-inspired version of the Double Dragon theme song. I won't spoil them all here, since guessing the artist or band being honored is part of the fun. A lot of them are pretty spot on as well, with this Depeche Mode one being my personal favorite.
Desperate people in their homes, artificial and alone. Queen of pity on her throne, first in line to cast a stone. Desperate people in their homes, artificial and alone. Queen of pity on her throne, first in line to cast a stone.
The amount of time and effort that seemingly went into this game is pretty staggering. The attention to detail in the music alone is worth the price of admission, if you ask me. But what in the hell do I know? Double Dragon Neon is one of the best throwback games on the market. WayForward has always been a pretty competent development team. A lot of their work could be considered an homage to the classic eras of gaming, but they often toss in a few inventive, modern elements to switch things up and keep things interesting. For the record, I'm not bellyaching over someone having a different opinion than I over a game. That would be juvenile. I do, however, think larger entertainment review sites should be a bit more responsible with their scores. Everything is obviously subjective, but to call this thing awful isn't fair. A lot of individuals play games casually and spend their hard-earned money on products based off of the opinions of these giant corporations. I mean, I never read or watch reviews of games I'm actively looking to explore, but escaping this awful rating of Double Dragon Neon was virtually impossible, since every time I searched online for information, it was right there at the tippy top, front and center, a big, fat, awful. I think it affects the work of smaller developers more than some might think. A lot of people still purchase their goods from criminally corporate shops like GameStop or EB, and get their information from big websites that can be a bit sketchy at times with how they conduct their business. I refuse to believe that no one at that website enjoyed this game, so why not have someone with a bit more of a fondness for it offer their review instead? To say something is awful turns a lot of people off a product, and while I agree that everyone is entitled to their opinion, some companies should be more responsible with what they publish. If you don't enjoy Double Dragon Neon, that's fine. It's far from awful though. To me, awful is something that gets tossed out frivolously without care. This thing is far from that. While I'm on my soapbox, I'm going to suggest something I swore I would never ask of any of my viewers. This channel is a hobby of mine. I don't want or need your money, nor will I ever ask for it. What I would like is for those who enjoy this content to subscribe and give a thumbs up here and there if you dig the work I do. I didn't want to have to ask, but some of my videos get quite a few views, but my subscription numbers remain fairly static. Click subscribe and turn notifications off if you don't want to be reminded when I upload content. That's what I do for channels I appreciate, because I hate pop-ups on my computer and phone. It might not look like it, but a lot of work goes into providing content, so subscribe, hit the thumbs up or thumbs down, and leave a comment, not only on my channel, but all channels you dig. YouTube is a pretty terrible service, but subscriptions really do matter, especially to us smaller hobbyists. Now, enjoy what might be one of the best endings in any game from Double Dragon Neon, an awful piece of garbage that has no place in a world where no one appreciates the 80s or beat 'em up games.
you.